In this video, we're looking at the Kinera BD005 Pro versus the Tin Hifi T2. Which one is better? Is there a better one? Let's get into it. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. So there's a lot of people been asking about the difference or which one is better between the BD005 Pro and the T2 here. So we're going to try and get to the bottom of that today and help you make the best decision if you are tossing up these two models. So before we get started, I'm going to take a quick look at what you get in the package, the physical build, and then we'll talk about the differences in how they sound. So let's start with the Kinera here. I'm going to call it the Kinera because the BD005 Pro is going to get pretty tired pretty quickly if I keep saying that again and again. So I'm just going to call it the Kinera. Put that there for a moment. Now, in terms of what you get in the box, actually, in terms of what you get in both of these boxes, there's not much difference. The main differences are with the Kinera, you get a clamshell carrying case, which is always pretty handy. But having said that, I don't use carrying cases all that often. I generally just keep an IEM in my pocket or a little bag. So the Kinera, you get the carrying case. With the Tin Hifi T2, you get a slightly better selection of ear tips. With this one, you get like 4 pairs of silicone ear tips, I think. With the T2, you get more silicone ear tips, plus you also get 2 pairs of the famous blue Tin Hifi foam tips. I'll give you a quick look because people go wild over these. Yes, part of the T2's secret to its success has been these magical foams. I don't use them myself, but people love them. I'll start with the price now, and the Kinera BD005 Pro is $49, and the Tin Hifi T2 is about $39. Internally, the Kinera here is a dual driver hybrid model. It's got one 9.2mm beryllium coated dynamic driver and one balanced armature driver. The Tin T2, on the other hand, has got a double dynamic driver configuration, which is a little bit more rare than what we see with the hybrids. Pros and cons, I'll leave it up to you. Now, let's come in for a closer look. Now, I think you would agree, for a budget IEM, $49, the Kinera here is probably one of the prettiest IEMs you'll find around that price point. It's really, really gorgeous. Comes in a few different colors, and each one has these sort of gold specks on the faceplate with the gold colored logo there. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful IEM. Obviously, it's resin or acrylic, pseudo custom shape. It's got aluminium nozzles on it with little mesh protective guard. And that about sums up the build. It's lightweight, it's very comfortable, does have better noise isolation than the T2. And let's have a quick look at the T2 now. Obviously, this is an aluminium or an aluminium alloy. So there they are, acrylic and aluminium. I don't really have a preference for either material. I will say I find the Kinera to be more comfortable. It feels more secure in my ears. And so for that, I will give a point to the Kinera. So with all that aside, let's just get onto the sound and talk about how they sound. And I'll start with the T2 since it came first. And there are a few defining characteristics about the T2. One is the sort of light quantity of its bass. It has a fairly linear sound signature, so fairly kind of light bass, forward mid-range, and a forward but a very smooth treble. And the treble is, a lot of people attribute the T2's excellent sound to the bass. I think it plays a major role, but I don't think enough people pay attention to how good the treble is on these things. It's an exceptionally smooth treble. It's got good density and a nice timbre, but it's a forward treble, but at the same time, it is very smooth. It is not harsh, it's not bright or sharp. In fact, I'll throw up the frequency response for both of these here. The Tin 2 is the blue one, the Kinera is the red one. So let's talk about the bass for a second. The T2's bass has natural weight and thickness, but it's reasonably light in quantity. This enables it to maintain a natural tone while at the same time allowing the mid-range to shine without any bass bleeding into the mid-range. The combination of the T2's light bass and forward treble create a sound with above average clarity, although it's not class leading. Actually, I shouldn't say that at all. The clarity is good, but compared to the Kinera here and other recent models like KB Ear Lark, for example, the level of clarity on the T2 is kind of ordinary, to be honest with you. It's not great, but that is part of what makes it good, and we'll get to that hopefully if I don't forget. But back on track now. So it's got this fairly light bass, but the bass has a really natural weight to it. The leading edge of bass notes like kick drums and things, slightly blunted, not really soft and thick, but just slightly blunted to sound very natural, as is the decay. It's not a really fast bass, but because it's lower in level or quantity, it just lets the mid-range really come forward, and that in turn with the sort of the forwardness of the really excellent smooth treble just makes this really nice cruisy sound that's not in your face. It's a very mature kind of tuning, very easy to listen to. Some people, of course, one of the main complaints that people have had is they say they would have liked more bass. Personally, I find it to be just about right. And even though the T2 here has a nice clean and detailed sound, I think I would say it's about average in terms of overall resolution. So to sum it up, it has a nice linear response, a light bass, but a bass that has a natural weight, really lovely mid-range, kind of full-bodied mids. They're not lean, they're not anemic or analytical. It's a very musical sounding mid-range. Both male and female vocals sound very nice and natural. Not the most articulate. The clarity is good, but not great. And then you've got this treble, which is concentrated in the upper treble. The lower treble sort of dips, and it's not all that forward, but it's the upper treble that comes forward. So it doesn't have that sort of stark harshness that a lot of emphasized lower treble sounds often have. You get this. Instead, you get this upper treble that adds a spaciousness, particularly width, and a nice open sound, a nice airy sound in the treble. And that's, for me, is probably the number one defining factor of the T2 sound, is the tuning of its treble. Now onto the Kinera, the BD005 Pro. It's more V-shaped and it has a warmer overall tonality than the T2. That additional warmth comes from its enhanced bass. It does have a fair amount of bass, so if you're into that, this will probably be the one that would suit your preferences the best. It has a surprisingly good quality bass though, which really plays a key role in the Kinera's overall sound quality. The leading edge of bass notes is more defined compared to the T2. It has a cleaner leading edge, so it's got a bit more of a defined slam rather than a thump. It's a faster bass overall. The decay is also faster than the T2. And that's partly due to the way the treble is tuned on this, but I'll stick to the bass for now. So it is a very clean, very well defined bass. It is a fast bass as well. Remember, it's got that beryllium coated driver, which probably plays a part in how good the bass is, if you believe any of that marketing speak. Now in the mid-range, the Kinera is actually slightly leaner than the T2, just the mid-range part, the core mid-range. Now this is because of the way the lower treble is tuned, forward lower treble, and the way that the bass kind of fades off above 200 Hertz. So you end up with this mid-range that has a fairly neutral note weight, very good clarity in the mid-range, very good instrument separation as well, but it could use a touch more warmth or thickness, note thickness, for a more natural sound. Despite the Kinera being more V-shaped, vocal upper registers are a touch more forward compared to the T2, but the T2 brings the sort of the core mid-range forward. So chesty voices, male voices are a bit more forward on here, whereas the harmonics and higher vocal registers are a little bit more forward on the Kinera. And the Kinera's treble has more bite to it than the T2. Actually, this one has surprisingly better detail retrieval than the T2. I'm not saying that the T2 has bad detail retrieval, it's actually very good, but because of that forwardness of the lower treble and the clarity, instrument separation, and the speed of the driver, it has very good detail retrieval, and you'll pick up more micro details on this one. The overall resolution is actually a bit better on this, but the coherency and sort of organic natural sound of the T2 is a major player in this one's quality. Like I mentioned earlier, the T2's treble is concentrated in the upper treble region, whereas in the lower treble it actually has a fairly significant dip around 6 to 7 kilohertz, and that takes out a lot of the sharpness or any edginess out of the treble, and what you're left with in its place is just this light, high-end sort of airiness, very open sound. In comparison, the Kinera here has a denser lower treble, a bit more bite in the lower treble, and contrast sort of, so a bit starker sound, whereas this one is a little bit more rounded, airier. This one is sharper, more defined, but a little bit edgier. And I'll try to wrap this up now. Did we learn anything? Probably not, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the Kinera has better noise isolation. It's got more bass. It's got a faster bass. It has better detail retrieval, better clarity and resolution, but it is V-shaped somewhat. The Tin T2, on the other hand, sounds slightly more accurate and natural as far as tonality goes. Very cohesive sound coming from those two dynamic drivers. The overall presentation is slightly smoother than the Kinera. The Kinera is a bit more energetic and upfront. The T2 is somewhat more laid back. It has a more forward core mid-range, which will appeal to a lot of people. However, remember the quantity of the bass is fairly light. But as a result, it has more vocal density, sort of a denser center image, wide soundstage, deeper soundstage, better instrument separation, smoother, more natural sound. So hopefully that clears things up a little bit. Which one is better? Well, you know, it depends what you're looking for. If you like bass, you're going to like the Kinera probably. And if you're looking for a really mature, refined, kind of slightly smoother, laid back sound, the Tin T2 is still a legend even to this day. So that's about it for this video, guys. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, Parfam audiophile style. And if you're new to the channel, you want to see more reviews like this in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you later.